My hands haven't stopped shaking in 27 years. Oh, they're steady enough now when I reach for my morning coffee or sign a check at the grocery store. The tremor is subtle, nearly invisible to anyone who doesn't know to look for it. But I know. I feel it in the microscopic flutter of muscle memory, the phantom weight of a scalpel I'll never hold again, the ghost of precision that once made me the finest cardiac surgeon on the East Coast. Today, my granddaughter Emma received her acceptance letter to Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. She called me first, before her parents, her voice bright with the kind of joy I remember feeling once upon a time. "Grandpa, I did it. I'm going to be a surgeon, just like you, just like me." The words hit like a physical blow, stealing my breath in a way that 27 years of chain smoking never could. If she only knew what "just like me" really meant. If she understood that her hero grandfather, the man whose framed diplomas and commendations line the walls of my study, is nothing more than a fraud whose moment of weakness cost an innocent woman her life. I was 51 then. Dr. Samuel Morrison, Chief of Cardiothoracic Surgery at Metropolitan General Hospital. 15 years I'd held that position, built a reputation that drew patients from 3 states. My success rate was legendary, 98.3% survival on bypass surgeries, numbers that made me arrogant enough to believe I was untouchable. The medical journals featured my techniques. Residents competed for the chance to observe my operations. I was scheduled to deliver the keynote address at the American College of Surgeons convention that fall. But success has its own gravitational pull, drawing you toward the very thing that will destroy you. The drinking started innocuously enough, a glass of wine with dinner after particularly difficult cases, then 2 glasses, then a tumbler of bourbon before bed to quiet the voices of patients who didn't make it, the ones whose families I'd had to face in sterile waiting rooms with devastating news. The practice of medicine, I told myself, required emotional anesthesia. How else could we make life and death decisions with steady hands? By the winter of 1997, I was drinking every night. By spring, I needed a morning drink to stop the shaking from the night before. I became an expert at concealment, breath mints, eye drops, cologne to mask the smell. I scheduled my surgeries for late morning or afternoon, giving myself time to achieve what I called operational equilibrium. 3 shots of vodka, precisely measured, just enough to steady my hands without impairing my judgment. Or so I convinced myself. The day everything changed was a Tuesday in August. I remember because Emma's mother, my daughter Sarah, had called that morning to tell me Emma had taken her first steps. 11 months old, walking across the living room with her arms outstretched, laughing. I should have been thinking about that miracle when I scrubbed in for surgery. Instead, I was calculating whether the 2 drinks I'd had with lunch would be enough to get me through a triple bypass. Mrs. Catherine Walsh, 63 years old, grandmother of 5, retired elementary school teacher. Her chart read like a textbook case: 3 blocked arteries, good overall health otherwise, excellent prognosis. Routine surgery for someone with my experience. I'd done hundreds just like it. But my hands were shaking that morning. Not visibly. I'd learned to control that. But I could feel the fine tremor in my fingertips as I made the initial incision. The alcohol hadn't been enough. I needed more steady, and my body was demanding its medicine. I should have stopped then. Should have invented an emergency, called in another surgeon, done anything but continue with compromised hands and an addled mind. But I was Dr. Samuel Morrison. I didn't make mistakes. I didn't fail. The surgery began normally enough. My resident, Dr. Patricia Mills, assisted with her usual competence. The bypass proceeded according to protocol: mammary artery to the LAD, saphenous vein, grafts to the circumflex and right coronary artery. Everything looked perfect on the monitors. Mrs. Walsh's vitals were stable. Then came the moment that replays in my mind every night when I close my eyes. I was placing the final sutures on the aortic anastomosis when my hands betrayed me. The tremor I'd been fighting all morning seized control for just an instant, less than a second, but long enough for the needle to slip. Instead of the precise placement that had become second nature over thousands of surgeries, the suture went too deep, puncturing the posterior wall of the aorta. We worked on her for 47 minutes. Cardiac massage, defibrillation, every drug in our arsenal to restart her heart. Nothing worked. Catherine Walsh died on my table at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in August, while her family waited in the surgical lounge expecting good news about their beloved mother and grandmother. The official cause of death was listed as intraoperative complications leading to cardiac arrest. The hospital's Morbidity and Mortality Committee ruled it an unavoidable surgical complication. These things happen, even to the best surgeons. No one questioned Dr. Morrison's technique or judgment. No one suspected that their chief of surgery had been operating under the influence. No one except Dr. Mills. I saw it in her eyes during the debriefing, the way she looked at my hands when I gestured, the slight pause before she agreed with my assessment of what had gone wrong. She knew. Maybe not the specifics, but she sensed something wasn't right. Patricia Mills was too good a physician not to recognize when the facts didn't align with the evidence. She never said anything officially, never filed a report or raised concerns with hospital administration, but she began watching me differently, noting my schedules, observing my behavior in the OR. I could feel her scrutiny like a weight on my shoulders every time we worked together. 3 months later, she requested a transfer to another hospital. When I asked her why, she looked me straight in the eye and said, "I think it's time for me to work with surgeons I can trust completely." The message was clear. She was protecting future patients from me while giving me the chance to address whatever she suspected was wrong. It was more mercy than I deserved, though I was too deep in my addiction to recognize it at the time. Mrs. Walsh's funeral was held on a Friday. I attended, as I always did, for patients we lost. I stood in the back of the church while her children spoke about their mother's kindness, her dedication to her students, her love for her grandchildren. Her youngest daughter, barely 25, broke down while describing how her mother had been planning to teach her to make pierogies for Christmas, a family tradition stretching back generations. She was going to live to see her grandchildren graduate, the daughter sobbed. She had so many plans, so much love left to give. I wanted to stand up and scream the truth, that their mother was dead because Dr. Samuel Morrison was a drunk who'd been too arrogant to admit he shouldn't be holding a scalpel, that all their grief, all their loss, could have been prevented if I'd simply had the courage to acknowledge my problem and get help. Instead, I approached the family afterward and offered my condolences. Mrs. Walsh's husband, a dignified man with carpenter's hands and eyes red from crying, shook my hand and thanked me for trying to save his wife. "The other doctor, she told us you did everything possible," he said, "that these things sometimes happen even with the best surgeons. We know it wasn't your fault, doctor." Those words, "it wasn't your fault," followed me home and into a bottle of bourbon that lasted until dawn. It wasn't my fault. If only that were true. If only I could believe the lie everyone else was willing to accept. I stopped drinking that night, not because I found the strength to overcome my addiction, but because I was too terrified to ever operate again. I checked myself into a private rehabilitation facility, telling my colleagues and family that I was suffering from exhaustion and needed time to recover. The hospital granted me a medical leave that stretched into early retirement. I never performed surgery again. The years that followed were a careful reconstruction of a life built on concealment. I threw myself into teaching, accepting a position at the university's medical school where I could share my knowledge without touching patients. I became an advocate for physician wellness programs, speaking publicly about the dangers of burnout and the importance of recognizing when doctors need help. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd become an expert on exactly the problem that had destroyed my career and killed Catherine Walsh. My family never knew the real reason I retired early. Sarah thought I was being wise. stepping back while I was still at the top of my game to spend more time with my granddaughter. My wife Helen suspected depression. She'd noticed my drinking but attributed it to the stress of losing patients. She was proud of me for recognizing I needed help and getting treatment. Helen died 5 years ago, never knowing the truth about her husband's greatest failure. Sometimes I think that was a mercy for both of us. She loved the man she thought I was, the dedicated healer, the gifted surgeon who'd saved thousands of lives. She died believing she'd been married to a hero, not a killer. But Emma is different. From the time she could walk, she was fascinated by medicine. She'd sit in my study for hours, looking through my old medical textbooks, asking questions about the heart models and anatomical charts that lined the walls. When she was 8, she announced she wanted to be a surgeon, just like Grandpa. When she was 12, she started volunteering at the hospital. By 16, she was shadowing doctors during her summer breaks. Watching her passion develop has been both a joy and a torment. She has the hands for surgery, steady, graceful, precise. She has the mind for it too, analytical, quick under pressure, capable of the kind of three-dimensional thinking that makes great surgeons. But more than that, she has something I lost long before that Tuesday in August. She has integrity. Emma operates from a place of pure compassion. She wants to heal people not for glory or recognition, but because she genuinely cannot bear the thought of preventable suffering. She reminds me of who I was, or who I thought I was, when I first held a scalpel 35 years ago. Last month she asked me to tell her about my most difficult case. We were sitting in my study, the same room where I'd celebrated my first successful surgery, where I'd planned techniques that would become standard practice, where I'd hidden bottles of vodka behind medical journals. "I know you must have lost patience, Grandpa," she said, with the kind of mature empathy that makes me proud and heartbroken in equal measure. "How did you handle it? How did you keep going when someone died despite everything you tried to do?" I looked at her earnest face, those steady hands folded in her lap, and I almost told her everything. Almost explained that the most difficult case wasn't one where I'd done everything right and still lost the patient. It was the one where I'd done everything wrong and killed someone through my own weakness and arrogance. Instead, I gave her the answer every mentor gives. You remember that you're human, that medicine isn't perfect, and that your job is to learn from every case so you can be better for the next patient. True words as far as they went, but incomplete. What I should have said was, you stay sober. You admit when you're impaired. You put your patients' lives ahead of your own ego, even when, especially when, it costs you everything you think you want. Now she's been accepted to Johns Hopkins, and in 4 years she'll be Dr. Emma Morrison, carrying the same name that once commanded respect in operating rooms across the country. She'll be just like me, but God willing, she'll be the version of me that existed before alcohol and arrogance transformed healing hands into instruments of death. The tremor is worse today. Maybe it's the emotion of Emma's call, or maybe it's the weight of 27 years of carried guilt finally becoming too much for my aging body to bear. I catch myself gripping my coffee cup tighter to hide the shaking, the same way I once gripped surgical instruments to compensate for hands that couldn't be trusted. I've been thinking about Dr. Mills a lot lately. She's retired now, living in Oregon with her husband, but we exchange Christmas cards every year. Her signature is always steady, precise. Surgeons' hands that never betrayed their owner or their patients. I wonder if she ever thinks about that Tuesday in August, if she ever regrets not speaking up more forcefully about her suspicions. I hope not. The guilt I carry should be mine alone. Catherine Walsh would be 90 now if she'd lived. Her grandchildren, the ones she never got to see graduate, never got to teach family recipes, never got to hold as they achieved their own dreams, are adults now, living lives their grandmother will never witness. All because a drunk surgeon was too proud to admit he shouldn't be holding a knife. Emma wants to specialize in cardiac surgery. Of course she does. She wants to follow in her grandfather's footsteps, to save lives the way she believes I saved lives. The irony is almost unbearable. She'll be working to repair hearts while I live with the knowledge that I stopped one forever. I should tell her the truth. Should explain that the grandfather she idolizes is a fraud, that the career she wants to emulate was built on a foundation of lies and ended in tragedy. Should warn her that the line between healer and killer can be as thin as 3 shots of vodka and a moment's tremor. But I won't. I'm too much of a coward, and she's too close to achieving her dreams. Instead, I'll support her, guide her, and pray that she becomes the surgeon I never was. One whose hands never shake with anything but the natural anxiety that comes from holding someone's life in your palms. Tonight, when Emma calls to tell me about her plans for medical school, I'll listen to her excitement and offer my congratulations. I'll tell her how proud I am, how much I believe in her, how she's going to make a difference in the world. All of it will be true. What I won't tell her is that every night before I go to sleep, I still see Catherine Walsh's face in those final moments, still hear the monitor's flatline, still feel the failure of my trembling hands. I won't tell her that the greatest lesson of my career isn't in any textbook or journal article. It's the knowledge that the moment you stop respecting the sacred trust between doctor and patient, you stop being a healer and become something else entirely. She'll learn her own lessons, make her own choices, find her own path through the moral complexities of medicine. But she'll do it with steady hands and a clear conscience, things her grandfather traded away for the temporary relief of liquid courage. Emma Morrison will be just like me, the me I should have been, the me I was before pride and addiction turned healing into killing. She'll carry our name into operating rooms where lives will be saved by hands that never tremble with anything but appropriate reverence for the responsibility they hold. And maybe, in some small way, that will be enough redemption for an old man whose greatest achievement wasn't any of the hearts he successfully repaired, but the heart he helped shape in a granddaughter, who will be everything he failed to remain. The phone is ringing. Emma, calling to share her joy with the grandfather she believes shares her noble calling. Time to put on the mask one more time, to play the role of the proud mentor while hiding the truth of what mentorship really cost. My hands are shaking as I reach for the receiver. They always will be.